Don Fezell, also known as the Collector. And you can definitely see why as you stand behind and look at some of the cars. And one of the most notable cars behind us is Bud Faubel's Hemi Honker. So thanks for taking a little time with us today, Don. And can you talk a little bit about the Hemi Honker for us?
Well, the Hemi Honker is actually the first car that was sold to the public, the first Hemi race car that Chrysler sold. The Ram Chargers got the mule car, the test car, and Bud Faubel was there at Chrysler, and he drove this car off the assembly line. It was the first car sold to the public, so it has a lot of history. And Bud won, 90% of his races in '64 with this car. He ran it up at Indy. He won the Winter Nationals, and of course he won a lot of track meets around the East with this car. So it is one of the best Hemi cars out there, and the restoration is just the way it was in '64. And Bud will tell you that he loves the car, and it's the best car that he had of that era.
Sure.
And it's back the way it was. So it's got the original motor still in it, the original interior still in it. It's painted the way it was back then, and it's just really a good car.
Now, what year did you buy that car?
I bought the car in '95.
And did you have to do much to the car? Or?
The car was already painted and lettered. We just did all the small stuff, the cosmetic stuff. Redid the motor, the engine bay, made sure it was all right, and put it back together. So it's a great car. The first race Hemi.
Yeah, amazing in itself.
Yeah, they had the race Hemis in '64, '65, and then again in '68. So the race Hemis were sold 3 years in the '60s.
Here at the 2012 York Muscle Car Reunion Show with Bud Faubel, Mr. Hemi Honker. So I guess right off the bat, how did you get the nickname the Hemi Honker?
One of the race car drivers down at Daytona Beach put that on one of my cars I was driving one time, so I kind of liked it, and I just kept putting it on my cars thereafter.
Okay, and then so you've been kind of in racing for quite a while. Where'd you get your start at?
I started off when I was about 13 or 14 in junk cars, running in the local tracks where they just had, you ran the car till it flew up, and then you got another one,
Okay.
Old junkers. But I kept moving up on cars, and I really got into the big times about when I was maybe 20 or 21 years old. And that was with 3As when they were like NASCAR. They had circuit cars running in tracks. And
Sure.
I ran there. First races I run was in 3As.
So what year or when did you, or how old were you when you got the 1964 Hemi Honker?
64 Hemi Honker, that's real late stuff. That would have been 38 or 40 somewhere.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that car ran pretty strong. You were very successful with that car.
Yeah, it did real well. I had that white one before that.
Yeah.
And it did very well. That's when Bill Jenkins was my mechanic. And this car here,
the 65.
yeah, that was George Waller here was the mechanic.
Okay.
But the factory built the engines from the bottom up, so all we did was check them and replace things that were worn.
Just minor modifications.
Right.
So with the 64, you were Mr. Stock Eliminator, and then with the 65, you repeated that honor with the Mr. Stock Eliminator title.
Right. I did that with the Winter Nationals in Phoenix, Arizona.
Okay.
In 1965.
And then you've kind of always had the need for speed. You were a fighter pilot.
Yes.
As well.
2 wars. I flew F-86s in Korea, and then I flew the F-4 in Nam.
Wow, how was that? What was that like? That was probably an exhilarating experience, I'm sure.
Well, I had been flying all along and doing air shows and things, and I was kind of used to rolling around and doing all that stuff. But it was just that with the fan engines, we had lots more speed.
Sure.
That's all. The biggest thing was the speed was the only difference.
Yeah.
Planes all fly the same, except that you have to do something quicker than others.
Yeah. So you did the airplanes, the cars. Which one do you like better, if you could even say? It's kind of a different world, but...
Yeah, it's 2 different things. Well, you get older, you get kind of out of airplanes because your reflexes slow down and you don't want to keep going. I still fly, I still have an airplane. But right now, cars are more business. I have an automobile agency, so I sell more cars than I do planes. So
Yeah, so you have had a dealership for quite a while that you've been very active, even up until today, very active with.
I've been in the dealership since 1947.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Now, how'd you get started in the dealership?
Well, my dad had a garage.
Oh, okay.
And I worked for him and the mechanics and things. I would take the pans down for them, and clean all the parts, and so they could put them back together quicker. And you just do that for a period of time, and everything keeps growing on you. You keep doing something else in the car business, and I went into the selling end of it, and then I finally bought the dealership.
Wow. So you're a busy guy. You have airplanes, race cars.
Yep.
He's got a dealership he's still active with today, and you also have your commercial airlines license.
Right.
You flew
Right.
for quite a while.
I'm an airline transport pilot, yes.
My goodness.
I'll give you a card here.
Oh, okay, good. Hey, you're a busy guy, and it seems as if your track record speaks for itself, with being very successful. And there's his title on his business card, Captain Bud Faubel. So whether it's a Hemi or an airliner,
Doesn't make any difference to me.
That's right. You're going full speed.
That's right.
Well, thanks so much, Bud, for kind of talking with us here about your cars, and appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
All right. Have a great day.
Bud Faubel was known as the gentleman racer, who usually wore a shirt and tie to each race back in the 60s, and nothing has changed up until today, as Bud is always dressed to the nines. Bud and Barbara Faubel enjoy ballroom dancing. In the next clip, you will see them dancing on the starting line at Beaver Springs Dragway in 2011 to drag racing legend Dickie Estevez singing one of their favorite songs.
Story, kind of going back to the honker. 2 years ago or 3 years ago, you let Bud take the car down the
Beaver Springs.
the track at Beaver Springs, and he ran it hard, didn't he?
Yeah, he ran it in the 11s
Oh, jeez.
and blew a soft plug out of the motor. And I thought he blew the motor up. Steam was flying everywhere. I thought it was oil.
Oh,
But it was only steam.
thank goodness.
Didn't hurt the motor at all. But he got back to the pits and said, man, he said, that thing runs pretty good. And he said, it still shifts pretty good, too. He was shifting at 6,500.
Oh, my golly. Didn't baby it.
Yeah.
So then just fast forwarding to about, 10 minutes ago, Grumpy got into 63, started that up, revved it up a little bit, and then Bud Faubel right here next to us in the honker got in that, revved it up a little bit, and then he kind of struck again with your little model car.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
It
Struck
was
me good.
sitting on there, and when
Vibrated off.
yeah, of course, when you rev it up to about 7,500, it tends to shake things, and it accidentally dropped the model off, which is kind of a neat story.
So the model has to go back in the body shop.
Yeah, the model's going back to the body shop, which would rather do it to the 124 scale than the real car. Yeah.
And here's Bud, patiently waiting to get in his old 64 Hemi Honker. Grumpy doesn't look excited, but he jumped at the chance to get in the old Z11 to fire it up for the crowd. I am sure Grumpy does not need any reminders, but Don makes sure Grumpy gets settled in properly. As every second goes past, the crowd gets bigger to see the drag racing legends who made these lightweight cars famous.
Over here a little more.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1, get up. I like it.
That's pretty amazing.
Hey folks, seriously, how about a round of applause for all the people listening in our thank you so much. And a special thanks today to and also the call. But thank you especially also to Don Fezell for providing us with the card. Very awesome there, Bill. We know that thank you very much. So long. Thank you very much. And for a full fun back week left. And as the song moves back, this is a wonderful time.
When Bud got out of his old Hemi Honker, he looked around and said, "Did I win?"
So thanks so much. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Appreciate you being interested in the cars.
Absolutely. Thank you.
This first Hemi lightweight Dodge has been meticulously restored and is completely documented. The Honker is truly a muscle car legend. Don's lightweight car collection has been featured in every car magazine publication in the country. Don has developed great relationships with the drivers of his legendary race cars, and you can tell by the memorabilia displayed in each one of his cars. Thanks again, Don, for sharing the stories of your legendary lightweight factory muscle car collection to guys like me.